Tarek, a 22-year-old university student, was full of aspirations, yet grounded in the modest realities of his small village. Life there was uncomplicated, with his days split between studying and assisting his family with household tasks. Known for his curious mind and quiet charisma, he was well-liked, yet an unnamed emptiness lingered within him, an elusive longing for something deeper. Margaret, a 56-year-old nurse who had recently relocated to the village, was seeking refuge from her past. After several years of widowhood, she filled her days caring for patients at a local clinic and spent her evenings immersed in her collection of books. Despite her kind and gentle spirit, the villagers found her somewhat mysterious, often discussing her reserved nature and unfamiliar ways. Though she carried herself with a quiet grace, feelings of isolation often followed her. Their lives became intertwined on one fateful afternoon, when Tarek sought solace from the sweltering heat. By venturing into the nearby woods, he frequented this secluded area for contemplation, which helped him cope with life's pressures. As he wandered deeper, he heard the gentle sound of water flowing nearby and was drawn to the hidden riverbank. As he approached, he froze upon seeing Margaret bathing in the stream, her image illuminated by the sunlight filtering through the foliage. Startled, he hadn't intended to interrupt her. Momentarily paralyzed by a mix of embarrassment and curiosity, he weighed his options when Margaret glanced his way. Her reaction was one of surprise. She gasped and instinctively covered herself with a nearby scarf. Embarrassed, Tara quickly apologized before fleeing back to the trees, overwhelmed by a mix of regret and shame as he replayed the encounter in his mind. Similarly troubled, Margaret had sought the seclusion of the riverbank, precisely for its privacy, and was unprepared for anyone to walk in on her. Yet amidst her shock, she felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in many years. That evening, Tar grappled with guilt and felt compelled to apologize. Though the prospect was daunting, the next morning with trembling hands, he knocked on Margaret's door. Upon opening the door, she regarded him with an unreadable expression. "I'm so sorry," he rushed to say. "I didn't mean to intrude. It was purely accidental." Margaret held his gaze, her stern demeanor softening at the sincerity in his eyes. "It's okay," she finally reassured him. "Let's move past this." Neither realized that this awkward, fleeting moment would spark a connection that would deeply impact both their lives. In the days that followed, Tarek's guilt propelled him to the clinic, initially as a way to make amends. This began to shift as his intentions evolved beyond mere regret. Likewise, Margaret, though she initially hesitated, found comfort in Tarek's company, which injected an unexpected vibrancy into her previously solitary days. Their interactions began with light discussions about the clinic and village, but soon blossomed into deeper conversations on philosophy, literature, and life's complexities. Tarek was captivated by Margaret's wisdom and her tales of nursing in the city during her younger years. In turn, Margaret was inspired by Tarek's youthful curiosity and his dreams of becoming a writer, often encouraging him with guidance that had long been lacking in his life. As their connection deepened, challenges arose. The villagers started to notice their growing bond, gossiping about the young man's frequent visits to the older woman. Tarek's family, especially his mother, who held traditional values, expressed worry about the implications of his friendship with Margaret and its potential impact on his reputation. Despite the mounting pressure, Tarek found it hard to distance himself from Margaret, who seemed to understand a part of him that no one else did. For Margaret, Tarek represented the vitality she believed she had lost. Their friendship offered her a purpose and a connection she had not realized she needed. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in warm hues, they sat together on Margaret's porch. Tarek read aloud from a beloved book of poetry, creating an intimate atmosphere that enveloped them both. "Why don't you write something like this?" Margaret asked, her voice filled with admiration. "I want to," Tarek replied, his gaze wandering, "but I doubt I can express emotions like these poets do." With a smile, Margaret encouraged him. "You carry deep feelings, Tarek. That's the foundation for creating something beautiful. Just be honest in your writing in these moments." The lines between friendship and something deeper began to blur. Though either spoke of it, they both felt a subtle, yet undeniable connection that transcended societal expectations. Beneath the surface, however, lay a growing sense of unease. They were acutely aware that society would not accept their bond. The whispers around them intensified, and the burden of tradition loomed heavily over their relationship, resembling a storm just waiting to erupt. One evening, quite unexpectedly, a sudden downpour soaked the village and prompted Tarek to seek refuge in Margaret's home. Arriving at her doorstep drenched, he was welcomed with a warm towel and a steaming cup of tea. And electric tension filled the air between them, yet neither dared to mention it. The rain pattern on the roof only heightened the thick silence, creating an almost palpable sensation in the room. Margaret sat opposite him, her gaze drifting towards the window. Her thoughts concealed, Tarek observed her. His heart weighed down by emotions he struggled to identify. He admired her strength, compassion, and quiet resolve, finding her more beautiful than ever, not just in looks, but in her very being elegant, wise, and unmistakably human. "I've never encountered anyone like you." He finally spoke softly, breaking the silence, his tone hesitant yet sincere. "You've shifted how I view the world." Margaret met his gaze, her expression inscrutable. "Tarek, you don't understand what you're saying," she responded, though her voice wavered. "Yes, I do." He pressed, leaning closer. "You've provided something I didn't know I needed." She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "This isn't right. We can't." But before she could complete her thought, Tarek reached for her hand, their fingers brushing lightly. The contacts sparked a rush of emotions. They had both been holding back for too long. Margaret attempted to withdraw, but her resistance crumbled as his lips found hers. For a fleeting moment, the outside world faded away. When they broke apart, the weight of reality loomed over them like a thick fog. Margaret turned away, tears flowing down her face. "This can't happen again," she murmured. "It's wrong, Tarek. I'm old enough to be your mother. What will people think?" Tarek lacked a response. He was caught between the fervor of his feelings and the burden of societal norms. "I don't care what they think," he replied, though his voice faltered. In the days that followed, tension hung heavily in the air. Consumed by guilt and uncertainty, Tar drifted away from Margaret, avoiding her in fear of the fallout. Margaret, too, was engulfed in remorse, understanding that their connection would be met with disdain and that her actions could tarnish Tarek's reputation. The village being small ensured that secrets quickly emerged. A neighbor, glimpsing through the window during that rainy night, shared what they saw by morning. Rumors had transformed into accusations. Tarek's family confronted him, their disappointment palpable. His mother, anger evident in her trembling voice, demanded the truth. "You've brought shame upon us," she cried, tears in her eyes. "How could you act so recklessly?" Margaret faced her own judgment, patience beginning to steer clear of her clinic, their disapproval evident in their hush murmurs and frigid glances. The life she had constructed in the village unraveled, leaving her feeling isolated and devastated. They had not only betrayed societal expectations, but also betrayed themselves. They had crossed the line they could never retreat from. The repercussions were profound. Both Tarek and Margaret grappled with the aftermath, their once soothing connection, now a source of anguish. The tumble that followed their moment of weakness left scars that neither could ignore. The village's chatter escalated into a deafening clamor, and the burden of judgment became unbearable for both. Tarak, once filled with ambitions, now felt caged in a life he couldn't escape. Margaret bore the weight of her shattered existence. With the quiet dignity she was known for, one evening, Tarak found himself standing outside Margaret's home again. Mustering the courage to knock felt daunting, but he saw closure when she opened the door. Her expression was weary yet warm. Worthlessly, she stepped back, allowing him to enter. "I'm leaving," Margaret said, gently shattering the silence. Tarak's heart sank, though he had anticipated this. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice strained. "I've contacted an old friend in the city," she explained. "There's a chance for a new beginning there, away from all this." Tarak nodded, struggling to articulate his feelings. "I'm sorry." He finally managed his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything, I never wanted to hurt you." Margaret managed a faint smile, though sorrow lingered in her eyes. "You didn't hurt me, Tarak. If anything, you made me realize I could still experience something genuine, even after a long time. But this, it was never meant to be." The air was saturated with unsaid words. Tarak longed to beg her to stay, but recognized that it would be selfish. Their connection, as intense as it was, had no rightful place in their world. "You have so much ahead of you," Margaret continued. "Don't let this define you. Use it to grow into the man I believe you can be." Tarak felt tears prick his eyes, but held them back. "And what about you?" he inquired. "I'll be okay," she assured him, though her voice trembled. "I've endured worse, Tarak. I'll overcome this as well." The days leading up to Margaret's departure were bittersweet, embodying a feeling of finality. Tarak spent most of his time in solitude, channeling his emotions into his writing, as he found comfort in creation, using the pain and lessons from their bond to inspire his words. On the morning of her departure, Tarak stood at the village's edge, watching as her belongings were loaded onto a small truck. Margaret turned to him one last time, her eyes shimmering with both sadness and gratitude. "Goodbye, Tarak," she said softly. "Goodbye, Margaret," he replied, his voice choked with emotion as the truck vanished down the road. Tarak felt an unexpected wave of tranquility wash over him. Their story had concluded, yet it had profoundly impacted their lives. Margaret, far away, sensed a similar feeling, though brief. Their connection had been transformative. It revealed to them both the depths of their emotions and the strength required to let go. Life would continue, but neither would forget the bond they shared. A pointed chapter in the narrative of their lives.